Hello, my name is Ted Slobojan. For 25 years, I was the landlord of a decaying apartment building on the outskirts of New York City. I thought I had seen it all: immigrants, young families, elderly loners. Yet, among the countless tenants who came and went, there was one who stood apart. One I never met. The occupant of room 3620. From the day I took the job, my predecessor, a frail, nervous man, gave me one peculiar piece of advice: never talk to the woman in 3620. His face had gone pale when he said it. His lips pressed tight as if to stop himself from saying more. When I pushed for an explanation, he shook his head and muttered, "Just don't." Room 3620 became an enigma. The registry listed a name, Marge Perry. But in all my years there, I never saw her, never heard her voice. Her rent was paid once a year. An entire year's payment delivered without fail on the morning of June 6th. The instructions left to me were clear: don't be awake when she leaves the check. Every year, without exception, a crisp check would appear outside her door by sunrise. I was to take it and move on. No maintenance requests, no complaints, no contact. For years, I obeyed. But curiosity, you see, is a relentless thing. It started innocently enough. I tried calling my predecessor, hoping he might share more about 3620. The nursing home receptionist told me he'd passed away years ago. With no answers from the past, I turned to technology. I installed a small camera inside the air duct facing 3620's door, feeding the footage directly to my computer. It felt wrong, invasive even, but the mystery gnawed at me. For 7 nights, I watched. For 7 nights, nothing happened. No movement, no sound, no sign of life. I began to wonder if the room was empty. But on the 8th night, it was June 6th. The clock read 5:30 a.m. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. The hallway outside 3620 was silent and still. Then, as the first hint of dawn crept through the edges of the building, I saw it. A shadow, not a person, but a thing. A shape that glided through the hallway, weightless, almost translucent. It stopped outside 3620. For a moment, it seemed to turn and look directly into the camera. A piercing, otherworldly ringing filled my ears. The screen crackled and went black. And then, silence. Terrified, I bolted from my chair and ran into the hallway. The air was icy, and an unnatural stillness hung around me. When I reached 3620, the door was closed. A check lay neatly on the floor, just as it always did. But this time, I didn't leave. I knocked. "Open up," I shouted, adrenaline overriding my fear. "I know you're in there." The door creaked open. There she was, Marge Perry. She was impossibly old, her frail body hunched, her skin like parchment stretched over brittle bones. Her sunken eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. "Would you like to come in?" Her voice was a rasp, barely audible. Before I could answer, she turned and shuffled into the room, leaving the door ajar. Against every instinct screaming at me to leave, I stepped inside. The air was heavy, stale, and suffused with a scent that reminded me of decay. The room was a chaotic jumble of old furniture and canvases stacked against the walls. She gestured to a tattered couch. "Sit," she said. I remained standing. She didn't seem to care. From a pile of clutter, she pulled out an easel and a stack of paintings. "I am an artist," she said, her lips curling into a faint, unsettling smile. "Would you like to see my work?" Unable to speak, I nodded. She placed a painting on the easel. It was a skyline, 2 towering buildings against a backdrop of smaller ones. The detail was astonishing, almost photographic. "Recognize it?" she asked. I nodded again. It was the view from the building. She swapped the painting for another. This one depicted a grand theater, its audience dressed in formal attire. The focal point was a man in a top hat, sitting alone in an upper box. Her work was masterful, hauntingly vivid. Then came the third painting. My breath caught. It was the Empire State Building. She stared at me, her eyes glinting with a strange light. "You will understand," she whispered. A chill ran through me. I couldn't stay another moment. As I turned to leave, I hesitated. "Is your name really Marge Perry?" I asked. Her lips twisted into a grimace that might have been a smile. "No," she said, "but I see you've met my friend." Her words sent a jolt of terror through me. I fled, grabbing the check as I ran. As I reached the hallway, I felt her eyes on my back, watching. When I dared to glance over my shoulder, the door to 3620 was closed. But I knew she was there, just beyond it. That night, I slept fitfully. I woke to a deafening crash. Stumbling to my feet, I opened my door and froze. Half the building was gone. The entire side where 3620 had collapsed into rubble. The air was thick with dust and the sound of sirens. Miraculously, my half of the building remained standing. Rescue workers sifted through the wreckage for days. They found bodies, twisted metal, shattered glass. But among the debris, they also found paintings intact, untouched by the destruction. One of them caught my eye before it was whisked away by authorities. It was the building, painted in perfect detail. But only half of it was there. The half that now lay in ruins. No trace of Marge Perry was ever found. No record of her existence appeared in the building's registry. And when I returned to my apartment, the check she had written had vanished. To this day, I cannot explain what I saw, what I experienced. But I've learned one thing. Some mysteries are best left unsolved. If you ever find yourself drawn to the unexplainable, heed my warning. Turn away. Some doors should never be opened.
Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to listen to similar stories in future.